Hello, hello, Lawrence Davis from Montfort International, talking today about playing with fire. There we are, a man playing with fire, very dangerous. And playing with fire is when you deal with a person who's a customer who's living overseas. The dangers are that you assume there's nothing other than I'll look after the UK side, you look after the Australian side, and assuming that is all that is required, when it's not true. It's not correct. See, what happens if the advisor in the country says, hold on a minute, I think the advice you've given in the UK is incorrect, and you've got skeletons in the cupboard. You have to understand the two systems and be bilingual in both systems. So there has to be a lead advisor. The lead advisor will always be the advisor in the country of residence. And the lead advisor, so if a person moves to Australia, the lead advisor will be in Australia. If a person moves to the UK, the lead advisor should be in the UK. So let's talk about physics. Customer who moves to Australia from the UK, moves to Australia from Canada, Spain, Italy, wherever, is going to be financially impacted by some international checkpoints. I've been doing this, must be 40 years now. And there's more and more checkpoints that you have to be aware of. So your standard customer in the UK will not be financially impacted by some international checkpoints. They've got no family overseas, they've never lived overseas, they've no assets overseas, they've no retirement schemes overseas, they're not nationals of another country, they're just nationals of the UK. They've got no beneficiaries of their estate living overseas, or they couldn't benefit from an overseas estate. They're non-physics. They've got no checkpoints, such as the ones I'm going to go through with you shortly. So you have to spot the differences between the two. And there are differences, key differences, that affect your advice. It creates risk, chance of consumer harm, if you don't know the differences and don't know what you're looking for. We put every customer under the microscope. We're looking for key issues that are going to cause us to change the advice, or that we know what we can do for a customer who's living overseas, and the overseas advisor, in this case Australia, knows what to do. So the microscope is key. You have to look into the detail. The devil is in the detail. And you have to look at things from different angles, not just assume that it's the same way as looking at the persons. If they were just living in the UK and their investments work the same way, they don't. The risk portfolio has to change. The risk rating has to change. Their view on matters has to change. Is it confusing? But it is. It isn't. We try to work off the Einstein principle, which is keep matters simple, not simpler. In other words, we try and explain things in a way that the customer understands. But we don't bypass the complex, in order to make matters simpler. We have to accept that cross-border advice is complex. It's confusing if you don't recognize that difference. So we have to start with visas. The Australian situation is it bridging? Is it temporary? Is it permanent? Are they citizens? Are they dual nationals? What is it? The visa will affect in many different ways what they can and can't do. So you have to understand the visa rules and what a visa condition is when it comes to financial planning. Because the visa will affect the next subject, which is tax. Some visas allow for no tax in the UK. Some visas call for no tax in Australia, and others cause tax in Australia on worldwide assets. The tax years are different. Australia ends on the 30th of June, UK 5th of April, and they have a different sort of system when it comes to national insurance. Australia doesn't have any. So it has Medicare levy, which is not national insurance. And you've then got there, it's that in Australia, there's no inheritance tax, capital gains tax. There's an issue. There's no double tax agreement between UK and Australia when it comes to inheritance tax. And how does that cause an impact on any investments in the UK or in Australia for somebody who is in Australia with a temporary on a permanent basis? Factor into that the regulation, the laws, the regulatory system, what you can and what you can't do for somebody who's in Australia and who's in the UK. And that's it doesn't have to be Australia, it could be any country in the world. The laws are different, the regulations are different, how things work is different when it comes to sort of retirement planning and how the law affects people on things such as offer of bonds. Like a bond, no top slicing in Australia. And even for an overseas asset, it will be assessed for tax in Australia depending on the visas. So the system here different to the system here, which is different to the system there. It's the one that's there. It's the one that's there. Brazil doesn't have a double tax agreement with the UK, by the way. It's the system here and how what happens if a person's a national of this country, there and there. What about the timing when they do things? So it's not just about tax returns, it's knowing how and where the benefits actually are. So savings plans may have to change, retirement plans may have to change. You may have to change the ownership of an asset. In the UK, husband and wife transfers of assets do not create cause a tax issue. In Australia, they do. There's lots of hidden dangers out there if you don't know what you don't know. Because what about the will? Has the will been changed? Is the will suitable for an Australian resident? That's the question. Has it been viewed in relation to a person who's living in Australia with a UK will by the Colonial Estates Act? Interesting one there. So all these things have to be looked at. Investment expenses, tax. What you can claim in the UK for a property rented out is different to the property you can claim in Australia. Because the UK property will be assessed for tax in Australia, depending on the visa. And then we've got fungible assets. Currency comes into it because if currency varies, then Australia can assess the growth in the value or the reduction in value caused by exchange rate fluctuation. So we have checkpoints. If you don't have those checkpoints, you can go straight through. That light's on green, but it may be red next time. And what you have to do is you have to look at everything there and ensure that the left hand and the right hand knows what's going on. And the UK advisor and the Australian advisor have got an agreed process so that they know what will happen if they change anything in the UK or change things in Australia. And that's why you have to have these checkpoints in place. Do you remember Mr. Rumsfeld, Donald? Famous for saying there are things that people know they know, things that people know they don't know. Now, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you know how to give advice? Because how do you know the questions to ask? What do you understand about how the system works between the UK and Australia? What's the advice? What's the experience? If you don't know what you don't know, do you know the questions to ask or what you're looking for? We'll come to what you're looking for in a minute. But now, the notes you take are different. You're asking different questions. Yeah, what are you looking for? The needle in the haystack? If you don't know what you don't know, what are you looking for? And this is the dangers because you can get hit back from behind, and the customer can get hit back from behind if you don't deal with this properly. And we have countless stories of what has happened when things have gone wrong because of a lack of understanding of how the two systems differ. High risk of consumer harm, high risk to your business. You don't know how to deal with this subject. So you can have a blinkered approach and turn a blind eye to the reality that the systems are different. If you do, you're playing with danger, playing with fire, dangerous tactic. You see, if a person's in the UK and they're not a physic, they're not going to have their be linked together with another country. Here we have linkage. You've got to know what happens at the point of linkage. If you don't, then that's when you result in problems for the customer and for yourself. So to recap the physic issue, just dwell on this for a second. Who's a physic, who's a non-physic? Anybody who moves outside the country, outside the UK, is a physic. if, and you have to have a detection process of knowing what you're looking for. You must do it at every client meeting because it can lead to problems. So both advisors in each country have got to be aware of how the other country works so that they can maximize and optimize the client's position. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. You know where we are. If you want to make contact, please do. But please take very great care of what I've just said. It is not plug and play, and it's not just simply, I'll look after the UK side, you look after the Australian side. That is asking for trouble.